You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauryn Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy-to-implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life.
Good. It's been like 3 weeks since we talked. So
it's been a while.
Yeah, I went on a couple trips. You were on a trip. So yeah, we kind of recorded early. But I went to Oregon, saw some redwoods during a family reunion for Julia's family. And then I went to Yellowstone to see my parents last weekend.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, that was fun. And then yesterday, Duke and I took a 9.5 mile hike where we just followed deer trails on the side of a mountain. Gosh. And I almost couldn't walk this morning because my left hip was hurting so bad.
Oh my gosh.
I got it to the point where I can walk normal. It's just it's still painful when I walk up and downstairs. It'll be okay in the next couple of days. What's going on in your I'll probably live. What's going on in your world?
Well, like you said, I was on a trip. We also had a family vacation to Texas, which I think I've probably mentioned on here before. It was really actually pretty fun. We were in Galveston, so we got to be on the bay side of Galveston, but also went to the beach side and did all the things that you do near water, like fishing and going in the ocean. And I got my first jellyfish sting, so that was super fun. But and I guess if I haven't mentioned it on here before, I am one of those people who is terrified of bodies of water. So yeah, that was not an ideal thing to happen to me because that just played right into my fear.
Nice. I did not know that you were afraid of the ocean.
Yeah, very scared. Actually, our guest later on this episode could tell you a bunch of stories about how she was probably the first person who got me to go past my ankles in a body of water.
In any body of water or just
in any body of water? Well, I mean, mainly oceans. Like, I don't go in lakes either. I don't go in rivers either. So yeah, it was, other than a pool, I hadn't been in a body of water past my ankles, and she was the first person to get me. I was up to my neck in the ocean on a trip that we took when I was like 18, and that was the first time. And I've been terrified of it, my whole life. So, but baby steps. So I got in the ocean in Galveston and got my first jellyfish sting. And it wasn't like we saw a bunch of little itty bitty baby, not baby, but just small jellyfish. And this one just happened to be like the size of my forearm. So yeah, it was fun. But
awesome.
Anyway, yeah, that was my trip.
Isn't that a good trip?
It was a pretty good trip. Other than the jellyfish sting, yeah.
Right. Good. Well, this week we have a special guest interview that is really awesome. So I don't even want to do too much of intro here because we went a little longer than normal. But we are talking to your friend Jessie, and she talks about her overcoming failure and trials and tribulations in her way to be one of the very few female firefighters in the country. So let's get on to the interview.
Jessie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So Jessie is going to join us to tell a little bit more about her. Not more, I guess we haven't talked to her yet. Travis and I have talked about her, but she's going to share some of her transformation with us today. We had a guest, I don't know, months ago at this point now, who shared his tremendous weight loss journey. And Jessie kind of has the opposite direction, which is a really interesting story. So Jessie and I have been friends for forever, so I know her really well.
12 years, I think now. 13, maybe?
Ooh, lucky 13.
Yeah. Going strong. It's good.
Lucky 13.
Uh-huh.
I love the number 13. Don't judge me.
So you hate hotels. Hotels don't have a 13th
yeah. Floor. How dare they?
It's really weird because there's still a 13th floor.
Yeah, they just don't call it 13.
Right.
That's dumb. Anyway.
So Jessie, welcome to the show. And
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so let's get into your story a little bit. I have a very basic rundown, so I think it'd be great if you just kind of shared what you went through.
Okay. So like I said, like Lauren said, we've known each other for a long time. We met in high school, and even in high school, and even before that, I always knew that I wanted to be a firefighter. That was my goal in life. It was my dream. It was everything that I ever wanted to do. I don't know where it came from. I don't have any family members that did that. It was just this ingrained, dyed in the wool, burning passion of mine. And it was always something I wanted to do. So growing up, I was always an athlete. I played sports. I played football when I was younger. I played soccer. I played softball. I was always really athletic, and body type wise, always had like a pretty athletic build. And I'm not super tall. I'm about 5'6", but I always, had that kind of like natural muscle kind of build, especially for a girl. I never really thought anything about it. I was an athlete. I played all these sports, and I was always in really good shape.
She also was in band.
I also was in band, so
and was a
So
band
there's
geek
how
with
you
me.
two met. Okay.
Yeah, you can be an athlete and also a nerd. You can do both. But we play drums, so that's like
we were the cool kids of the band.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
You've tried to explain this to me.
Yeah, I've argued that before.
In the hierarchy of the band, the drums
We're the
Definitely the cool
Anyway.
kids. All right.
So when I was graduating high school, and I was looking into going to college, and I wanted to go to college, I knew I wanted to study fire science because I wanted to do a degree that was going to be towards what I wanted to do. There's only a couple schools in the whole country that have fire science as a bachelor's degree. I applied to all of them. I got into one, ended up actually being in New Jersey. I got a full ride scholarship. Yeah. They paid for everything: tuition, room and board, all of it. So it was really
That's
cool.
awesome.
And I'm just putting all my eggs in this basket. I'm going to go. I'm going to fly across the country. I'm going to play sports. I played soccer and softball, both in college. And I'm going to get all this education, and I'm going to get a job as a firefighter, and I'm just going to live my dream. Right. So that was the path that I was on, just kind of throwing that out in there.
I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Why in the heck does New Jersey have a program in fire science when has there ever been a wildfire in New Jersey? Or are you like,
there's lots of buildings that catch on fire. That's the kind of firefighter that I want to be.
Building fire.
Structure fire. So
is this different than like NAU has a big fire science program? Did you actually
Yep.
study different stuff?
Yeah, so my program that I studied was taught mostly by FDNY firefighters. So the dean of the college that I went to, the Fire Science College, was a battalion chief retired out of FDNY. So that's the kind of, so think, big New York City fire truck, firefighters, like that's the education I was getting. This is how you put out fires in high-rise buildings. This is how you put out fires in, subway stations or whatever. So it's kind of that style of firefighting, not necessarily wildland, which I do now as my job. Spoiler alert, I actually did get the job at some point. But we do some wildland, but it's mostly structures, so buildings and houses and
Okay.
stuff
Well,
like
I'm glad to hear that New Jersey was teaching different fire science than NAU in Arizona.
Yes, totally different world. Yep.
Yeah, it would have been really weird if they were teaching you how to put out fires in the national forests in New Jersey, where there's no national forest.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. They don't call it I don't know why they call it the Garden State. There's not a whole lot of gardens there. But anyways,
South Jersey.
Yes.
South Jersey's pretty beautiful, and
Uh-huh.
and yeah, North Jersey's pretty city.
Yeah, that's where I was at. So, and it was a great experience, and everybody that I knew that I talked to there was I knew that I wanted to be a firefighter. It was super supportive of me. I ended up while I was playing sports, going to school. I actually graduated with a 4.0 from that college. But I also got my EMT certification, which is emergency medical technician. In the state of Arizona, in most states, you have to be an EMT first in order to even apply to be a firefighter. So I knew I had to do that first.
Interesting.
Yep. So, and I actually got a job working on an ambulance to get experience there, running medical calls and things like that. So while I was going to school, playing sports, working out, and working as an EMT, just my whole life revolved around, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to get this job and it's going to be my dream, right? So when I was a sophomore, so this would have been 2012, was when I took my very first fire exam. So how the hiring process works is you have to apply for a department that's hiring. They only hire like once every 2 or 3 years most of the time. So you apply, and thousands of people apply. Then you have to go and take a written test, which is very difficult, and they only take the top portion of people that pass. And then you have to do a physical, and then you have to do an interview. So there's kind of a multi-step process. So I took a test for Yuma Fire Department. Yep. Which again, I'm 19 years old, and I am excited to be a firefighter. I don't really care where. I was in Arizona. It was close enough. I could see myself, living out there and doing that. So I was super excited. So I applied, and I flew myself out from New Jersey to Yuma to take the written test, and I took it, and I passed. I did well. I flew back to school while they did all the processing stuff, and then they invited me to the physical, which is the next part. So I told everybody. I told my friends and family, and I had to rearrange my exam schedule with school, my professors, and all this stuff. So then I spent a lot of money I flew to Phoenix, and my mom picked me up, and my mom drove me to Yuma, and we were going to take I was going to take the physical the next day. So she took a day off of work. I flew back and forth, and it was this whole thing. So I show up, and I'm a college soccer player at this point. I am in what I thought to be incredible shape. And I went and I took this physical exam, which everybody was like, "Oh, you're going to smoke it. You're amazing." And I failed it. And it was terrible because they told me I was the only female to apply. And they said basically, and they loved me. They loved my personality.
Man.
They said that all you have to do is pass this physical, and we'll hire you tomorrow. You'll have your dream job in this department, and you're going to make this money and all this stuff. So I show up, and my mom gives me a power bar in the morning, and I feel great. And I go and I take this physical test, and I didn't pass it. And I walked away from that. I mean, I was absolutely, completely defeated. I walked away from that experience, and then I had to, first of all, tell my mom, who had picked me up from Sky Harbor, drove me to Yuma, took a day off work, and all this stuff, that I had failed this thing. And I had a dinner planned with my family to celebrate that day back in Phoenix.
Geez.
And then I had to tell them.
No.
And then I had to fly back to school, and everybody was like, "Oh, how did it go?" And I had to tell them. And so on the surface, that experience was heartbreaking in the fact that I felt like I let so many people down. But the big picture of it for me was that I had this goal and this dream, and something that is so much a part of me that I've always wanted. And I was faced with the reality, I thought, of maybe I cannot do this whole thing that I have lived my entire life for. And I put all my eggs in that basket. I went to a college in New Jersey to study this thing that's not going to apply to anything else. And I was, maybe I physically cannot do this. So I was faced with this kind of like existential crisis about it. So that was that moment where I had to decide, how am I going to continue to pursue this? And if I am, how am I going to be successful? Because I was unsuccessful before.
So before we get into that choice, I want to unpack this a little bit. You said you were 19 at this point.
19
Is that
years
right?
old, yep.
Okay. So you're
so
a freshman,
young.
correct?
I was a sophomore, so I might have been 20.
You were a
so 19
sophomore.
or 20.
Okay.
Yep.
So 19 or 20, you're a sophomore in college, you're a collegiate athlete.
Yep.
So you're doing this, and is this a 4-year degree program, or is this like
Yes,
an
bachelor's
associate's?
degree,
Okay, so you're ready to get out of school. You're just done. Is that correct?
I would have left, yeah, because you don't have to have, so in the
that's
in the
true.
firefighting world, you don't have to have a bachelor's degree to be hired. In order to be promoted later in your career, you need degrees to be captains and chiefs and stuff, but just the entry level, you don't need it. My plan was, okay, I'm going to go to school while I'm young. I got this scholarship, but if I get a job, I'm not going to say no to it because it's incredibly competitive. When I eventually did get hired, 3,000 people applied for my job, and they hired 11 of us. So people test for years and years and years.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's a very, very competitive thing. So my thought process was, I'm going to start testing, and if I get the job, I'm going to go for it, and I can always go back to school later. that was my plan.
Yeah, where you can always go back part-time or whatever. It's so
Absolutely. Yeah, people do it
flexible.
all the time. So
Yeah.
this was my first crack at it, and I thought I would take that opportunity. So
Well, that was
I was
cool.
about halfway
That's
into school.
good foresight. For
Awesome.
seeing that was going to potentially launch your career long before you got this degree.
Yep.
And I'm sure that was difficult because, at least when I was in school, everybody said if you don't get a degree, you're going to be worthless. So
Unfortunately, yep.
there was a lot of pressure to keep going for that bachelor's degree. So good on you to see what was really important in that. Okay, so now you failed.
Yep.
So can you kind of enlighten us onto what is going through your mind? You had this dinner party planned. Obviously, this is not the party you planned on.
Absolutely not. Nope.
So after you failed the test, what happened next? And also, what made you fail the test? Because I'm guessing being a soccer player, it's not cardio. This is what made you fail the test.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the test, the physical test to become a firefighter is called the CPAT, Candidate Physical Ability Test. It's a nationwide test, and every department, for the most part, uses that as their standard for physical fitness for new hires. So what the test is, in a nutshell, is they give you a time limit, it's 10 minutes and 20 seconds to complete 10 different stations, if you will. You have to wear a 50-pound weight vest. You start on a stair climber. You do the stair climber for about 3 minutes, and then you have to do a series of events that are job related. So you have saws that you have to carry. You have to raise up a ladder. You have to crawl through a maze. You have to pull hose. You have to do stuff that you would do as a firefighter that replicates it. And the vest replicates the personal equipment that we wear, the weight of it. So for me, when I took this test the first time, being a college soccer player, I was in incredible cardio shape, but I was tiny. I weighed about 117 pounds at the time of the test at 5'6". I had an 8-pack, which was great, but you put a 50-pound vest on a 117-pound person and ask them to carry around 70, 80-pound equipment. I just didn't have the mass. And that's part of what was my decision when I was unpacking, okay, this is how I feel when I'm defeated. So I failed, and I'd never done it before, but I didn't, it was the surprise, the shock of it, that there at no point in my mind before I took that test did I ever imagine in a million years I could fail, because I was in such good shape, right?
Yeah.
So after
you were almost a little arrogant in this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you didn't train for this test at all.
Nope.
You didn't.
And I didn't understand how to train for it.
Right.
So, and you were such a good student and everything before that. Like, you probably hadn't really failed anything in your life prior to that. So, like,
not to this extent.
Not like your first fire related failure. It was like your first big failure at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it was my whole trajectory of my life I felt was crumbling in front of me, because I thought I had done everything, in my ignorance, I suppose, in my ego, I thought I had done everything that I needed to be successful. I was an athlete. I ate great. I had an 8-pack. I felt like I was a badass, and I thought I would be able to walk in and smoke, and it would be no hair off my back kind of thing.
Right. And I'm sure looking back now, you can say how stupid you were.
Absolutely.
For the way you were training for soccer was great for soccer.
Yep.
But the way you were training for this fire test with no weight on your back ever, I'm guessing, probably not crawling, probably not climbing stairs or ladders for most of your training, you could probably look back at your 18 or your 19, 20-year-old self and say, wow, I was dumb. Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me in that, so there was a twofold experience, right? There was the emotional side of, okay, am I in my best self even capable of doing this job? A job that nationwide has 3% of the firefighters are women, 3%. And the 3% that there aren't necessarily always successful or like, I won't say good at the job, but aren't necessarily like all-star standouts that are going to promote it. What I envisioned for my career.
Yeah.
So I had to say, okay, am I arrogant thinking I'm even capable of doing this? Or if I can't, so that was the emotional, okay, I had to figure that out. But then the practical task oriented side of me was, okay, what change do I need to make to my life, to my lifestyle, to my eating, to my training, in order to give myself the best chance of being successful in this? So that was where I had to really take a step back. And so I took that test. That would have been 2012, near the end of 2012. And I weighed 117 pounds, and I decided I was going to change everything about how I ate, how I trained, and my whole lifestyle in order to, I decided I needed to be heavier. I needed to be stronger, I needed to be heavier, and I needed to have some training specificity, right? Now I know what the test is. So I go to the gym and I say, all right, so I bought a 50-pound vest, right, that I kept in my dorm room, and people thought I looked like a suicide bomber when I walked to the gym, because it was across the street from the campus, and I wore my vest that's got all the weights in it, and I would walk it to the gym every single day. And I created a circuit in the gym. I actually had the gym manager from the school move some equipment around so that it kind of made sense for me. And I replicated that test as closely as I possibly could using the gym equipment. So I started with the stairs, got on the stairs, and I said, okay, if the test is 3 minutes, then I'm going to do 5 minutes. If the test is at 60 steps a minute, I'm going to do 80 steps a minute. And then I'm going to hop off. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the leg press, because that mimics the dummy drag that I have to drag. And then I'm going to crawl to the next thing, which is I used a cable machine. There's a sledgehammer part. So I used a cable, because can't hit anything with a sledgehammer at the school gym, right? So I used the cable as heavy as I could, and I just did like oblique twists with that.
Nice.
And then there's a carry, like a saw carry. So, well, the saws are about 45 pounds. So I picked 65 pounds, and I'm going to carry them. And I did all this in gloves, so you have to wear work gloves. So I'd come to the gym in my suicide bomber vest and my work gloves, and there's Jess doing her thing every single day. And I added just incredible amounts of weightlifting stuff. I changed how I was eating, absolutely, because before I was eating like what I thought to be healthy. I was very lean and trim, and I was eating just a lot of like lean foods, and it's like, I'm gonna up my calorie intake significantly, which was difficult. And so from 2012, when I failed that first CPAT test, till the next time when I took it, when I ended up eventually getting hired by another department, I had put on 30 pounds of muscle. And the first time, like I said, the time limit for this test is 10 minutes and 20 seconds. I finished it in under 8 minutes, which is still a state record.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's been 7 years. So
that's
when
impressive.
I took that test, I weighed 147 pounds instead of 117 pounds.
Okay.
Wow.
So I want to unpack more of this, because how long did it take you from that moment of failure where your dreams are completely washed, and I'm sure you have tons of doubt in your
Absolutely.
mind about yourself? How long did it take you to say, you know what, this is all because my training sucked for this test? My training was great to be a soccer player. My training was probably good to be a long distance runner. But for this test, my training was terrible. So how long did that process take you? And what did you go through? How did you get to that point of realizing that, oh, I need to train like I'm a fireman instead of training like I'm a soccer player?
So a good question. So I came home from that Yuma trip. I had that very sad, solemn dinner with my family where they helped me lick my wounds, and told me how great I was and keep trying. And then that night I got on a plane and I flew back to New Jersey. So for that 6 hours that I was on that flight, this would have been the day, that night, actually, because I took the test in the morning, dinner, and then like a red eye overnight. I brought with me on the plane a small notebook pad, and I wrote down everything that I was feeling and everything that like all these doubts that were coming in and all this this emotional baggage and how I was feeling disappointed in myself and everyone else. It's just when I wrote all that down and I ripped it off and I crumbled it up and I put it away. And then I started a new sheet of paper and I said, like, I could still see it in my mind. I said, to-do list, number one. And I started listing all that stuff. So I recognized, based on how I felt while I was doing that test, I'm like, I know I need to be heavier to move this kind of weight with this kind of weight on me. And it's not just for the test, it's for the job, right? I need to be heavier. Say, okay, so that was my number one to-do list, gain weight, subsection. I'm going to do this and this and this. So I had a rough idea of I used that whole 6-hour plane ride just to kind of unpack what I thought I needed to do. The next couple days, I had some mentors that were from my college, right? All these FDNY firemen that I told you about that were professors.
Yeah.
And I went to see them and I had to check that ego at the door because they're so excited to see me and they're so excited. And I had to, first of all, tell them that I failed. And then I had to say, please help me. So I had a professor that taught a firefighter fitness class in the college. And I had taken the class the semester before, but after I had this conversation with him, he invited me to come back and student teach that course for the next couple of semesters so I could incorporate my training that I thought that I needed to do and then his advice into what he needed to do. And it was in a kind of like teaching, also learning atmosphere. So I'd say I had a plan in about a day, the same day, and then I had a working, I don't know, a real plan in probably like a week or two after that.
Okay, so that's a lot of maturity for a 19, 20-year-old to get smacked in the face, dreams killed, and come back basically that night on a red eye and be like, okay, what do I have to do? Because I'm still going to do this. I blew my shot this time at 19 or 20 years old, but I'm still going to do this. What do I have to do? And where did I fail? Because you didn't fail on that day. You failed in your training for that day. And this is an important thing for training. Like, people don't understand that training for one thing is very different than training for another thing. So I remember I had a roommate in college that I worked out with, and he was in ROTC, and he, on their physical fitness test, which was, I don't know, push-ups, a run, sit-ups, and there was something else, I think. Maybe that was it. Anyway, he was the best in their year, or in the whole program at that time. And one of the girls in ROTC at that point was a swimmer at our school, which our school was a D2 swimming school. So she was a legitimate athlete.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, I smoke her. They always say swimming's so good, and I smoke her in everything. And I was like, you don't understand. You're talking about two totally different things. Like, you're talking about your running ability and your ability to do push-ups and sit-ups, and that's great. Go get in a pool and see how you do it.
And see what happens.
Right, exactly. Even if you know how to swim, she's going to kick your butt because she trains for swimming. You were training for soccer. Soccer's all about speed, quickness, and endurance. Is that pretty accurate? Yeah. A soccer workout is a terrible workout for football.
Yes.
It's a horrible workout, obviously, for firefighting. So I think that's something that people don't understand until they go through something like you did, and then like evaluate, how did I screw this up? I'm in great shape. Well, you're in great soccer shape, not in great firefighter shape.
Absolutely.
So
that mentality, and I had known about that, studying, my minor is in exercise physiology. So I knew that from an academic way, training specificity, progressive overload. Like, I know all the words, I knew all the stuff, but applying that to your life sometimes
so much harder.
Different, especially when you're saying your ego gets in the way, or you think you're 20 years old and you're unstoppable and you're this stud, and then you get your butt kicked and you say, wow, I should probably listen to the science that I've been learning and that I know and that I used to train other people. I trained other people on the side too, and actually focus that on myself and take a good look in the mirror and say, all right, if I want to be good at this, then the only way to get good at this is by doing it and by replicating it as closely as possible. And I've taken that. So it's been I got hired 7 years ago, and I continued that mentality in my training every day to this day, because now my whole life is I'm training to be a firefighter. I'm training to be the best firefighter, the most efficient. And so all of my training, I like to do other fitness stuff. I like to hike, and I like to lift weights and all that stuff. That's fun, and that's hobby. When it comes to professionalism and to my job, the bulk of my training has to be specific to being good at my job.
Right. And there's carryover from those other things, especially hiking. Although I would imagine that hiking's pretty easy when you're used to doing things with 50 pounds on your back.
No, I do my hikes with 50 pounds on my back.
Oh, okay. You do it with, Okay. Then, well, that makes sense for your job, because then you're training for your job rather than just going for a hike. Lifting definitely has some benefits to your job, because you're obviously carrying heavy things, moving heavy things, and your suits weigh, I'm guessing 50 pounds is why they do the
it's a little more. It's about it's closer to 100. The air pack that we have on our back alone is 25, give or take.
Okay.
And then the protective equipment that we wear is about 50, and then tools that we carry is the extra 15 or 20. So, but the weight is one thing. It's the first of all, cumbersomeness of it. If you try doing a workout in like the bulkiest snow outfit that you've ever been in with these big heavy oven mitts,
right?
And that's one thing, but it's also it's the heat, honestly, especially living here in Arizona. That protective equipment is designed to allow us to enter buildings that are 1,000 degrees, so it keeps heat out, but it also is completely encapsulating. It holds your heat in. So you're doing the hardest workout that you've ever done in a snow outfit, basically completely encapsulated. So that's the training specificity part of it. Now that I've passed the test, I've gotten hired, now I'm on the job. In order for me to be good at wearing my bulky, hot, heavy equipment, is I have to train in my bulky, hot, heavy equipment, carrying weird stuff at weird angles and doing things over my head and crawling, because we crawl through hot houses, right, when heat rises. So we do a lot of crawling, and my training has to focus on that kind of movement and that kind of restrictiveness because of our equipment and all that stuff. So all the other stuff, lifting, super important, especially because, like I said, my body wants to be 117 pounds. That's kind of my homeostasis. That's not going to work for me. So I have to maintain that 140, 150 pound life. That's really hard for me. I have to eat a lot. I have to lift heavy regularly. It takes effort for me to maintain this, but I have understood through my failure that in order for me to be successful, I have to do this. I have to maintain that body type and that lifestyle in order to be successful in my job.
Right. You have to have the mass to support that strength is basically what it is. Yeah. So are you still playing soccer at this point, or did you give up on soccer?
So after my failure?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still played. I did not play in my senior year for professional reasons, basically. So I played my the first 3 years, and then my fourth year was all focused on, all right, I'm not going to be a professional soccer player. I'm going to be a professional firefighter. And like I said, it's incredibly competitive. So I made the decision to focus it was half physical choice, because it was very difficult for me to maintain mass when I was doing that much cardio because of soccer. So that was part of it. And the other part of it was that I wanted to focus more on, I wanted to be able to fly back and forth and take these exams that only happen every 2 or 3 years. I needed to have the flexibility to do that. I wanted to be able to work on that ambulance work, because that's how I was getting experience to talk about in interviews that the employers were going to be. It was all right, kid playtime, soccer's fun, but that's over. It's time to be grown up and kind of focus my energy on that. So
was there so you stayed another year while you were training to be a firefighter?
Yep.
And you're pounding food to gain weight, I'm guessing. I remember these days.
Oh yeah.
I gained 30
good
pounds
old days,
my first
right?
year. Yeah, I gained 30 pounds my first year of college. It was a lot of food. No, it wasn't the good old days. It was so hard, and you eat so much.
It is. It's hard.
Insane. You eat like 6 plates of food at dinner.
I drink a lot of milk. I'll tell you that. I drink milk with every meal, calories and protein,
Yeah.
and it took me a while to figure out the secret sauce as far as the eating went, especially with as a college student. I had limited resources, especially
Right.
where I was living, so I was kind of like at the mercy of the school and how what they provided as far as food goes. But it took me a little bit, but yeah, in those it was 22 months between my first test that I failed and that test that I set the record. And like I said, I put on 30 pounds, and it was not only the mass, but it was it was a lot, but it was a training specificity. I mean, it's the name of the game. So,
and in soccer, that your junior year, it would have been did you get any pushback for changing your body like this? And did you notice any decrease in your ability to keep up on the field because of training for this strength and things like that? Did you notice that you were slower, or your endurance for that sport suffered?
a little bit, yeah. So it was kind of a give and take. So my endurance for that type of just running, basically, because I stopped running off theory. I only ran when I was at practice. I wasn't doing anything off. So my running endurance was less, but I was so much more powerful, and I was more, So in a sense of like my physicality with other players, I was not getting pushed around anymore, and so it was give and take, right? Like I was used to playing the full 90 minutes. Maybe I wasn't playing 90 minutes anymore, but I was making just as positive of an impact on my team. At least that was how I felt, and how my coaches and teammates felt, because I had gained other strengths in that way. So
okay, so you didn't really have pushback in that sport because you were still able to contribute, at least at the level. Did you find, because soccer, I don't know much about soccer. I don't play soccer. I don't watch soccer. But soccer seems like it'd be a mix of sprint and endurance, mostly for sprinting. Is that correct?
Yep. So it depends on obviously the level, and it depends on the position that you play too. So
okay. Did you notice that? So when I gained all this weight, I went from, I gained the weight and the flexibility kind of at the same time. And I went from being like the slow person at my size to the fast person. So I was lifting weights, so I had a lot of strength. My cardio, as far as like endurance running, has never been good because I hate it. But for sprinting, I was faster than almost anybody my size once I gained all this weight, and then gained the flexibility and the strength to go with it. Did you notice that you were able to sprint faster or anything like that, or not really?
Yep, I'd say it's about almost the same experience. So it was building that power and that that sprinting ability for sure, just from lifting the weights, doing heavy squats and deadlifts and all that kind of stuff. I was definitely I was faster, more powerful, not necessarily, and it just makes sense. I was carrying around extra weight. I wasn't going to be able to carry it around as long as I was before, but there was that give and take for sure. And it was almost it's kind of a mental switch too. Because like I said, I love soccer. I played sports since I was a kid, and I love my team, and I love that teamwork, which is what attracted me to the fire service in the first place. It's much, much, much like playing a sport. It's a team thing. So that's what I like about it. But that failure in that career, that long-term goal, kind of reset my priorities a little bit when it came to my collegiate athletics. I mean, I wouldn't say that I didn't care about my, games and teams and practice, because that's not true, but it was not the focus anymore. It was definitely, I saw that as something that had given me the opportunity to be an athlete and to have this, this foundation that's going to help me in my career. But I also saw it as something that was taking something away from it. So I wasn't quite as invested, I guess. And I
Well,
had
you
other
went
stuff to do. Yeah.
I was going to say, it seems like you went from that being priority number 1 or 2, that in school, to now all of a sudden that's priority number 2 or 3 behind, I want to be a firefighter. And that is the
Forever,
number 1
yeah.
priority. And getting a 4.0 in school means 0 if I can't pass this test.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So that was part of that, like I said, on the plane ride, the to-do list and the just revamping kind of just how I saw the world. And I think a lot of people go through that at that age anyways, or at some age, but a lot of times it happens in the, high school to college. You're trying to figure out who you are, you're trying to figure out what you want, and you really have to unpack your priorities at some point. And I think that was my big moment as a adolescent young adult of saying I have to take control over my trajectory of my life. Where do I want to go, and how am I going to get there? Am I going to give up? No. Okay, check that box off. Now there's the other list, right? Follow the algorithm. Now what do I have to do to make that work? Because nobody's going to do it for me. It's going to be me. I can have help, and I did have a lot of help. I had people that were very supportive, like I said, mentors in the college, and my athletic coaches knew that I wanted to be a firefighter, and they loved that about me, and they wanted me to be successful in that too. Like, no, I didn't have anybody that was selfish about my decision, but ultimately it was me. I had to do that. I had to make those changes. I had to be disciplined. I had to figure that out, and then I had to follow through with it. So that was kind of that like aha moment of being a grown-up for me that happened on that plane ride.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's something that I see a lot, is that we don't go to that spot. Like the total accountability is not what I feel like is preached anymore. It's like, okay, you're going to get this degree and then you're just going to get this good job. It's like, no, that's not how the real world works, but that's what we were sold in high school. I think you got to that point way earlier than most people. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit when you say most people got there that early. It took a long time, even for me. I worked my butt off in college and stuff, but to figure out what I wanted and what was the most important things, it took a long time. I mean, I was probably 30 before I really figured that out. So kudos to you for figuring that out so early. Now, so all right, going to the second test. 2 years later, you go to the second test. We already know the results. However, what I want to know is, what were your thoughts, if you can remember? And I don't know if you journal like Lauryn does and have like this stack of journals that you can look back and see what your thoughts are.
She taught me how to do that.
Nice. So are you journaling at this point?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So maybe you have a more clear memory of this because of reading your old journals, but what are your thoughts going into that second test? Where are you going? It's 2 years later. You failed miserably the first time. You're heading to that test. I'm guessing you're on a plane again.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that plane ride and the night before? Did you sleep? That kind of deal.
Okay. So when I flew back for my second test, I was this would have been my senior semester. So like I said, those 2 years have gone by, and I see the light at the end of the tunnel for school. And yet I have just tested for this big major fire department, way better than Yuma, with blessing in disguise, right? Nothing against Yuma, but
I've been there.
Things happen. Things happen the way they're supposed to happen. I believe that. And I think that might have been a blessing in disguise looking back. But anyways, I mean, I see this dream, and I've thrown myself into it even more for the last 2 years. So I'm on my plane. This time I booked a flight that was 2 days before my test instead of that day, which I think was a huge difference just to get my mind right. I hung out with my mom. I hung out with my family. I surrounded myself with people who were with me from the beginning of this journey and had nothing but positive. But I went into the test much more humble, even though I was infinitely more prepared. I was much more humble, to the point where when you book this test, so they have testing facilities that proctor this. So your responsibility is to schedule it, and you go to like a third party, and then they do the test. So it costs money. And I shelled out as a broke college student, shelled out basically doubled the entry fee, which is a couple $100, which is a lot of money for me to have a practice and then to have an actual one. So a lot of people don't do that.
Smart.
Yep, and I wouldn't have done that
smart.
before. And so I, like I said, much more humble. I wasn't taking any chances with this, and I said I'm gonna set myself. I don't care that it's gonna cost me another $300 and I won't eat for a week because I'm broke and I'm in college. I'm committed to this, so I signed up for the practice. I showed up. There were a couple of other people that were there. I was very, very nervous, obviously. I looked around and they kind of told us like, hey, you signed up for practice, but we're going to time it. So if you pass, we'll count that. We'll just take your money for the second one. You don't have to do it twice. So that gave me a lot of peace of mind, right? So I came in and I suited up. I got all my stuff. And as soon as I stepped on the stairs is the first thing, I knew that I was good because I felt how I felt on those stairs the second time versus how I felt on the stairs the first time was absolutely night and day. And I was like, I
That must have felt so good in that moment to be like, this is it.
This is how it's supposed to feel. Because like I said, you're not just testing for the test, you're testing for your job. And I understand being a woman in a male dominated field vastly. I mean, like I said, 3%.
That's crazy.
Respect is something that's very difficult to earn as a female firefighter. And I don't just want to be the bare minimum. I wanted to be an all-star. I wanted to kick its ass. So being on that stair climber with that vest on, not even breathing hard. I could have had a full conversation with the proctor lady. We were laughing, we were joking. It was just that feeling of like, all right, everything that I doubted 2 years ago is being validated now. And I wasn't even done with the test, and I felt like I was reaping the reward for all the hard work that I had put in. So it was very, very good. So I did the practice and I passed with flying colors, and I didn't have to do it again
and set records.
Yeah, the rest is history. So it was good.
So where did you take the test again?
I work for Scottsdale Fire Department.
Okay.
It's like a third party. It's like some warehouse in Tempe.
Okay, so basically, did you already go through an interview and then you go through the test? Is that how this works?
For us, we do a written test, and then we do what's called an assessment, which is kind of like a mini tryout where they kind of like test your personality. Then you do the physical, and then the interview is after that. Okay. So I was kind of in the middle, but kind of in the end of the process. If I passed this, which obviously I did, all I had to do was an interview.
Right.
And then I was in. And like I said, out of 3,000 people, at this point, it was narrowed to about 25, and they were going to cut that number in half with the interviews. So
that's
I had
crazy.
already beat out a lot of people.
Yeah, that's crazy. Our acceptance rate in physical therapy school, I think, was 1.5% or something like that.
Wow. I think I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was crazy. Because NAU was one of the cheapest schools in the country and still had a good reputation. Yours is way under that. So your acceptance rate. However, you had a lot of ability to affect the chances of you getting accepted. Like you go in there and break the record, you pretty much have to walk in with a knife and threaten to stab the interviewer, I would imagine.
Right.
Yeah,
and I had so much else going for me. I mean, everything that I had set up and all of the help that I had gotten to that point set me up for success there, right? Like I was the only person that had a bachelor's degree in fire science that was competing, right? Like that shows that level of commitment. I was, a college athlete, which again, the athletics and teams really, it contributes to this. So people are like, oh, athletes, you know how to work hard, discipline, all that stuff. So I had that going for me. I had worked on the ambulance in New Jersey with all that experience, because the firefighters, we do medical too. I'm a paramedic as well. Right. So I had experience there. I had, I had all these cards in my hand to give, and I was very fortunate to have been able to have that. But it was the mental block for me was that physical test, because that's the only time I'd ever really failed. Everything else was golden with everything else. There was just that.
Yeah. I mean, you had lived your whole life for the interview. Like that interview, you could probably have made it through that the first round. Like, I mean, even since I met you, like when I met you, I knew you were going to be a firefighter. Like you were 14, 15 when I met you, and she was like, that was it. Like,
that's it. No questions asked.
Every single thing you chose to do, even at 14 and 15, were like firefighter.
Was setting up for that, laying the groundwork. So, and the physical part was just so important too. Like I said, not only because it's obviously a step that you have to pass, but being a female and having that already kind of working against me, like you have to be better. You have to be better than, I'm 145 pounds and I have to perform the exact same job in the exact same conditions than my 225 pound coworkers. I have a lot of stuff to
yeah, because I was gonna bring that up, because even though you put on that 30 pounds, you're still tiny.
Tiny.
I'm assuming for this job, because I still outweigh you by 30 pounds. Yep. And I'm an average size male, so good luck, right? You're still you're still little. You're probably by far the smallest person in your department, I would imagine.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's
go ahead.
That so that experience that I had, that 22 months of prepping for getting hired, had taught me, I think, pretty much everything that I needed to know about how to continue to be successful with that. So I'm fighting the mass game, I'm fighting the upper body strength game, and I know that I have natural challenges that I have to work against, and I've figured out how to train for that, and then techniques and stuff like that I frequently, I don't want to sound like I frequently outwork my coworkers, and that's the reputation that I have built. Even being so small, I have never had a problem keeping up with any of the training that we have to do or the stuff like that. So that's constant work.
Yeah, you train for
constant work. Nope.
So future Lauryn here from the editing room. As we continued to film, we decided to split this episode actually into 2 parts. This first part ended up being about 50 minutes, which was longer than our normal episode. But the second half next week will run about 30 minutes. There was so much great content from this interview that we just wanted to give it all to you without editing parts of it out. We were so thankful to have Jessie on as such a fascinating guest with so much great information. So make sure you tune in for part 2. This was so much fun. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.